The UI changed. Let me make sure that this is. Did I connect my audio correctly? Who knows? Hey, Xavier, can you hear me? I didn't actually check. And perfect. Thank you very much. Appreciate you. How are you doing today? Um, want to make sure that I keep this PR open on my other monitor. Not great today, but cold always be worse. Yes, that is fair. Could. Cold in all its meanings, plus, etc. So I have this PR open. I am kind of replying to people because I put it up this morning. Um, there is a comment that I'm going to reply to here. This is arbitrary glTF extension processing. Hey, Courier, how's it going? Just put up a PR today. I've been working on Skein stuff for a while now, but in the back of my head has been, and just to be clear, I don't know if this is going to make it in. It has to get reviewed first, etc. But I've been working on Skein stuff for a while, and in the back of my head, rattling around is to do all the stuff that I want to do with Skein, to do like light maps and to do like animation graph construction and to do a better job at component insertion, including things like relationships. Skein really needs to export its data as an extension, like a glTF extension. So I implemented that on the Skein side, the Blender side, and it can do that. And I put up PR to upstream this into Bevy so that we can have arbitrary like third-party glTF extension processing. So that PR went up today. So you're going to see me do a little bit of like open source replying to people on the PR and things like that. Yeah, extensions are better than extras. So that's all in this PR description as well. Basically, like Bevy doesn't support glTF extensions right now. They do support glTF extras. They actually support glTF extras really well. If you set glTF extras in, let's say, Blender, let's open Blender and get it on the right monitor and maybe make the panels a little bit bigger so people can actually see them on stream. Then if you go down to custom properties down here, that's a little bit not big enough. Let's go 172. If you go down here to custom properties, so I'm on the cube right now. I open a custom property. I can go in here. I can change this to like string or something. Name this as like, maybe string is the wrong thing to use. Let's use an integer, and let's say this is like health points and whatever. And like for Blender UI purposes, we can set them in the max. This is not like a limit in the sense of like something that would get to Bevy. But yeah. So health points 1, maybe we set this to like, oh, I don't know, this cube has 143 health. So these custom properties, when exported through glTF, come in as glTF extras. And that is really great. Support for glTF extras in Bevy is good. Let's look for extras. There are a number of different components. So the data for extras gets inserted directly onto components. And Skein listens for on add for all of these. Those values come in as strings. They're basically JSON, or really they could be technically, I guess, anything that you put in the glTF file, but realistically they're JSON. And then we parse those out and we get the component data from these components and we insert it. That's all great. except for the fact that like glTF extras is really meant for specific application use cases, not shared application use cases. So once you start doing things with glTF extras and you're like, oh, I have another game or somebody else has a game or something like that, then it makes sense to move the data from extras to extensions. And Skein should move from extras to extensions. You want to see the state of the first game you saw you working on in Skein, the platform one? I think the platform one was the reason Skein got created in the first place. So really what that game turned into is Skein. Like that game is kind of in more or less the kind of the same state that it was in at the time. I did some kinematic character controller stuff after that. And dealt with some physics stuff and things like that. But overall, the game with the platforms and the box holding and throwing and stuff like that turned into what Skein is, that project. Any plans for it? Could go back to it. Been a little bit overwhelmed. I have plans for, let's frame it this way. I have plans for being able to, within 3 months, start a game, finish it, and ship it on itch or Steam, right? So yes and no. We could go back to that concept in that game. I think the shaders I wrote for that game aren't necessarily impacting the gameplay in the way that I wanted them to. So that would need some fixes. And otherwise, it would be building kinematic character controller and some other things. So it's kind of on the list. It turned into like what Skein is. All of that time went into like building Skein in the first place and continuing it. But yes, that is like an overarching goal that I have is basically to take like a game jam's amount of time or a little bit more, build a game within 3 months and like ship it on Steam. Like that is what I'm moving towards overall. Scene extras are added later. Sometimes, maybe some special cases are not handled. Was scene extras? Extras, mesh, scene, material. Are we not handling something? Most people don't use scene extras. So it wouldn't surprise me. I would also be kind of surprised if I missed this. Where's the current handler? Yeah, I would have been surprised if we actually were missing scene extras. So we have glTF extras, material extras, mesh extras, scene extras, which kind of get split up arbitrarily because of Bevy. The reason we have 4 of them is kind of because mesh and materials get put onto the same entity. So we need 2 components that are different types to retain the data from both of those things on the same entity. And then glTF extras is kind of like all of the nodes. And glTF scene is like the scene root effectively. In a previous Bevy version, scene extras were not there and the glTF source needed to be handled. That was a long time ago, I think. A couple versions. The shaders for the platformer were very arty. Yes, I think that there was some interesting stuff there, especially around how do you properly use noise textures to like transition from one shader into another visual that I'm currently applying to, let's see, Rest Adventure, Bevy examples. That I'm currently applying to like these layered materials demos. So that piece of it grew into what is effectively, actually, this is just like a crate, actually. So it's a crate with 2D texture arrays and does some special handling and stuff like that and whatnot. But you can make this a material extension and do some things and transition from one material to another, like one full texture set to another full texture set. So that's where that came from. So like the game spawned a bunch of work is really what it did for me at the moment. So yeah, glTF extras. There's two examples here. One is building an animation graph via the extension, and one is building like turning 3D meshes into 2D to use in a 2D game, which are both very cool. I didn't PR the Skein extension demo, but I want to after this. Some other random stuff. And then there's like some comments that are happening here that I need to reply to. So you're going to watch me read somebody's comment and reply to it. So I have something in here that is called the glTF extension processor. It is a trait you have to implement for whatever struct you do. And there's this concept of like, which extensions are you going to handle? And there was a question here about not sure why there's an empty string. So made some changes, responded to it. And then got another comment that's kind of like, so you don't know much about glTF extensions, used extras a lot, but not extensions. However, it is surprising to me that the empty string has any effect. You would assume that if the extension AD's array doesn't match the name of, then the processor wouldn't be called. Yes, this was an intentional choice. So their comment is basically saying like, if I give an extension ID, then I should only get called for those extensions, which is actually borne out to be, I think, a good base assumption that turns out to be not true. So, the reason is a good base assumption and one that I worked with to start the implementation. Which is to say, hooks should only get called if they have extension data on that specific object. As it turns out, just having data on, say, animations without having any additional processing happening when all of the animations are collected or finalized, etc. Just having data on, say, animations, just having extension data without having any additional processing happening when all animations are collected or finalized, etc. Turns out to be an issue. There are many things that you'd want to do, such as there are many things that you'd want to do with the information from the extension data, including creating an animation graph, adding that graph to the assets, and applying it to the scene that has the root animation entities. If the only time the hooks are called is when there is data, data for that specific extension, then you miss out on this additional processing. There's also the use case for glTF extension processors that don't use the extension data. For example, if every glTF file has one set of animations that are all played independently, you can create an animation graph from the hooks, or by implementing a processor but not caring about specific extension data. This would then scale up to actually take advantage of extension data for things like describing, I don't know, how impactful so the reason the empty string exists is that we loop over all of the extensions and call all of the hooks, whether or not there is any actual data to be processed. Which is also why the first argument of the hook functions is an option. So you can optionally get this extension data when these hooks are called, right? And then just because one animation has extension data and another doesn't mean that you don't have a valid default value, right? Like one extension or one animation could be independent, and only the ones that need to be merged have labels on them, like things like that. This matches your idea of glTF extensions. A glTF can use an extension to have no data besides the fact that the extension is in use. Yes. Yes. I think that the mapping from extras to extensions is from a restricted mental model to an expanded mental model, which makes sense, right? Like it makes sense that if your mental model of additional data is just extras, then it's, if there is data, I want to do something with it, right? The mental model for extensions is, if there is or is not data on the thing that I'm processing, there could also be additional data globally at the root, and there could also be additional data stuffed into random buffers, and the extension could define how you're supposed to process that data and apply it to different things that don't have extension data on them. So extensions are far more generic. This is related to the expanded use case extensions serve over what extras can do. If you have an extras key, or rather the mental model I just described, right? The mental model for extras is, if I have extras do something with them. The mental model for extensions is there can be arbitrary additional data in any location or no additional data. There can be arbitrary additional location data in any location, including new buffers, global data at the root, or on specific objects, or no additional data, and all data. And regardless, the extension can have useful behavior that can apply to objects, glTF processing. There are reserved Bevy and Blender extension prefixes, which one to use, or one of those a new Skein prefix. It's the Bevy prefix is the one that I'm going to use for Skein. It's Bevy _ Skein is what it's going to be. I think that the goal of the Skein like component glTF extension is eventually at some point I want to make a PR and basically be like, hey, here's an official way to handle components from glTF files that we can just like upstream and it sits in like Bevy core, right? Like there is a, hey, we use reflection in this way. If you specify your components in the glTF extension data, you know, with like a Bevy _ components extension, and that is a reflection, like reflected component data, then it will just insert and work, right? That's what I want out of this at the end of the day. I think Skein would still exist in that world as a, like, I don't know that light maps make sense to upstream like that, but components are so core to how Bevy functions that I think that it does. At which point you can then have like a light maps extension, right? Where you export light maps into metadata from Blender, you process that in Bevy, and then handle those as component insertions. There are going to be arbitrary additional data in any location, including new buffers, global data at the root, or on specific objects, or no additional data. And regardless, the extension can have useful behavior that can apply to glTF processing. Whether or not that data exists in any given location. The model of extensions is strictly more generic than extras. I think that makes sense. I think that is a good base assumption and one that I started with the implementation, which I did, which is to say hooks should only get called if they have extension data on that specific glTF object. As it turns out, just having extension data on, say, animations, without having any additional processing happen when all the animations are collected or finalized turns out to be an issue. There are many things that you'd want to do with the information from the extension data, including creating an animation graph, which is one of the examples in this PR. Adding that graph to the assets and applying it to the scene that has the root animation entities. If the only time hooks are called is when there is data for a specific extension, then you miss out on this additional processing. Which I think is like, summarizes it pretty well, but I go into a little bit more detail there. I think that is the current set of feedback, so. Yep, details. So I have actually implemented this extension for, I'm not running a Bevy application. Let me run cargo run example. do component tests. I'm just in the Skein repo running a random example. This is the one that I usually use for testing random stuff. It usually doesn't have an actual scene in it. I guess I already did this, is what this comes down to. What I was going to do is export this glTF file, but this already works. So if you do something like fetch the remote type registry, go here, insert some component, in this case, like player or something like that. This has got a name, some power, whatever. File export glTF. This now has extras and extensions, with extras on by default and extensions off by default. My goal here is to have like a smooth migration. So that's why both options exist. So if you click extensions and you unclick extras and you export, then you end up with this glTF file. This also includes some lights and stuff. So KHR likes punctual is also a whatchamacallit, glTF extension. But you can see the Bevy Skein extension being used here as well. So the Bevy Skein extension doesn't have root global data, but the KHR lights punctual one actually does. So you can see that they add a new root key with a bunch of objects in it. And these are lights, right? So in the glTF data here, we have a scene, we have a couple of nodes. This is going to be like cube, camera, light. And you can see here on node 0, there's now an extensions key that has a Bevy Skein key inside of it. And I'm storing component data inside of that. So if we were processing the cube here, given the glTF processor that I just implemented upstream, then you would get components. You would get like this JSON object here in your component hook when you processed the cube, which is pretty cool. Hey, Sarav, how are you? So I'm super excited about this. I really hope that I can get enough review to get it into 0.18. I don't know if it will. 0.18 is coming really soon. Like I feel like they're going to ship the RC while this PR is up. Haven't seen it go out yet, so. Yada, yada. Cool. I'm going to stare at this on my other monitor so that I know whether this is okay or not. Cool. So that PR is up. We have a version of Bevy that can handle extensions. And we have a version of Skein on the Blender side, at least, that can produce the data that we would need to deal with these extensions. So the thing left to do is to put those two things together and try to get it to work. So I think what I'm actually going to do is, see, I've got two things, right? I guess I'll do this on a branch. We're going to have to do the 0.18 upgrade like very soon and very quickly. I think that everything is fine with that. Cheers for the Rust Advent of Code series is crazy useful. Sweet. I'm glad you found it useful. How'd you find Advent of Code? Did you have fun? I do that every year. So, you know, if you want to come back for 2026 and hang out, definitely do. So I think that I'm going to start working with this branch from my repo as a dependency. I don't think we have any dependencies otherwise. in the Skein repo. So if I throw this into extension support and this becomes cargo toml, this is going to become all the versioning, right? So anything that has a 0.17 is going to turn into a Git dependency at the moment. Git equals this, branch equals, I don't remember what I called the branch. What did I call the branch? glTF extension processor. glTF extension processor. So theoretically, this is also what we need for the optional. Bevy remote needs like a version here and stuff. And then dev dependencies can do this as well. And then I think I have one more cargo toml in here that I should update. That is not actually like part of the workspace, so to speak. So I always forget to update it, but. All right. This will be like the third Bevy release that Skein has participated in, which is cool. We had support for what, 15, 16, and 17? 16, 16, and 17? Something like that. Yeah, sorry to hear that, Xavier. This is not the greatest stream in the world. No, this is just a tribute. I don't know what you mean by that. I have no idea what that's a reference to. So we have the data, we have the, oh, Tenacious D. It's funny. I haven't listened to Tenacious D in years, I think. And the devil, I love metal. So the support for doing this for an extension in Blender was actually really straightforward. So we already have that part, and we need to work on the Skein part. So we have the question in my head is really, how are we going to support both methods of operation? I want to, given the opportunity, ship support for both at the same time. I want somebody to be able to whatchamacallit, I want people to be able to work with the stuff they already have without breaking them, is really what I want. Isn't Rust a language that says it's bomb-proof but breaks Linux when implemented? There's a lot going on in that comment. But you're definitely not going to get like a rise out of me or anything. I don't care that much. Had to catch a Pokemon, sorry. So the Linux stuff is stabilized. Or not stabilized, but it's no longer experimental. Where's my Chrome window? I never have a Chrome window open. What? Linux, Rust, no longer experimental. Everybody's making videos about it. It's hilarious that everybody just rushes for that. This will have the link, and I want the link to the actual thing. They changed the title. That's really funny. So the end of the Rust kernel experiment. Don't start language wars, Sorov, please. We don't do language bashing here in any direction. So the Linux kernel stuff just became non-experimental. So there's the maintainer summit that I think is happening over the last few days this week. I don't really know. I didn't pay that close of attention. But it is now no longer experimental, which is very cool. because a lot of people have been putting in a lot of work there. And to have another language in the kernel is like a huge achievement. So I mean, I would say I disagree with the second half of the thing that you said, right? But breaks Linux when implemented. You know, if it broke Linux when implemented, it wouldn't be the second language of the Linux kernel, right? It also doesn't say it's bomb proof, right? Like let's see, Rust language, right? Like there's nothing on this page that really says like it'll solve all your problems, right? Um, there are things about memory safety and in relation to memory unsafe languages, that's really important. But that's not really a good sales pitch to people who use memory safe languages, you know? Like it's not a good sales pitch for people who use like JavaScript and Ruby and Python, but Rust is really useful for those people too. It's like being able to take a step up into like a more performant by default environment with a compiled language that really helps you out. A lot of the JavaScript ecosystem is like really getting into things like TypeScript too, right? And Rust is basically like, if you think about JavaScript, the language, plus TypeScript being written from the beginning, then you would end up with something kind of like Rust. It took a lot of learnings from, Bundler and NPM and all these other things that came before it. Cargo is really nice, etc. Yeah, Ubuntu core utils. I'm actually not super up to date on that. But like they're doing a full re-implementation for a reason, like people don't rebuild the kernel or rebuild, core utils for no reason, right? Like it's not a thing that people take lightly, is the way that I would frame it. And I don't think that how do I frame this? Like the TypeScript people moved to Go for their compiler, right? And giving up TypeScript to move to Go is a big decision. It doesn't matter that they didn't choose, like Rust or Zig or whatever, it doesn't matter. Go fit their project, so they used it, which is great. And it's giving them supposedly improvements. I don't think they've actually shipped it yet. I'm actually not too sure. But like people don't make those kinds of choices lightheartedly, right? There's a lot of serious consideration that goes into them. What's my take on Zig and Go? Go is a really easy language to pick up. I say really easy, but I don't want to make anybody feel bad if they're like getting into programming for the first time and they find it hard. Like it being an easy language, quote unquote, doesn't mean that it's easy. Go is intentionally like a subset of other languages. Like it's a small language for a reason. Like they made specific choices around that. And it is kind of good at what it does. I first encountered Go when I worked at Docker in 2014, like 2015, 2016. And it was fine. It worked fine. It doesn't really spark joy for me, is what I would say. I think I find Rust more enjoyable to write, and I feel better about the like things the compiler is doing for me in Rust. Like I appreciate the things the Rust compiler checks for me. But there's nothing wrong with Go, right? Like Go is a perfectly fine language. It's got an ecosystem. It is basically what the container ecosystem built its back on, right? Zig is, I just don't think I personally have a use case for Zig, is really what it is. I don't really have an opinion on Zig. It just doesn't, like, I'm not a person who writes C and wants a modern C, which I feel like is what Zig kind of like targets and is. So like if I don't have a use case for it, then I don't really have like a strong opinion, you know? Like to have an opinion on Zig, I would have had to use Zig for something. And I don't use Zig. So um and I don't have like a project that would come up that I would be like, oh, Zig is perfect for, you know, this thing or that thing. I think Rust covers pretty much all the bases that I need covered at the moment. Uh, let's see. Prisma moved away from Rust and saw a 3x speed increase. Yeah, sure. I mean, shrug. Who knows what they were doing in that code base? I don't. There's always whether you're moving to or from Rust or to or from Go or to or from some language, your next system, if it doesn't completely fail, which is common, your next system benefits from all of the knowledge you gained from building the first system. So it would surprise me a lot to hear of a rewrite that ended up with a bad result, right? Like if you rewrite into any language, there have to be reasons that you're doing that. And the reasons are always, well, we'll say they're never like, oh, we slowed down by 10x. Like that's never a reason that you do a rewrite. So, and how is Elixir? I don't use Elixir all that much. I hear it's like intuitive for Ruby people. Erlang is really cool. I would, if anybody hasn't like checked out Erlang in general, what is it? Learn you some Erlang for great good. This is an okay like introduction to Erlang and what Erlang is about. And I think that if you're looking at Elixir, it's worth becoming familiar with what OTP is. I think Erlang is really cool. Erlang is like, it's different in a way that gives you a lot of information. Oh, you use Erlang. Later, Xavier. Hope your day gets better. You use Erlang? I mean, Erlang's lovely. Like, I can't say that it's perfect. My experience with Erlang is like a long time ago. There was a database called React. It was very, very cool. The website is still up? Wow. There's no way. There's no way. There's a blog. Okay, when was the last post on the blog? The last post on the blog was 2017. It's been a while. But React is a very cool project written in Erlang. Cloudflare crashed due to some Rusty issues. I don't know what exactly you're trying to do here, but Cloudflare crashed because at the scale that they operate at, there's nothing that they could have done to recover from that, right? At some point, like if you're building production systems, you have to make a decision about what is going to happen. And you cannot infinitely recover. Right? You cannot like, well, we have Erlang right here. Erlang's motto is let it crash, right? Crash and come back up, which OTP is very, very cool. Highly suggest going through like, I haven't gone through this specific book in a very long time, but Erlang is very, very, very cool. But like, there's all sorts of things that you do in production to stop a problem from getting worse, right? Circuit breakers, et cetera, et cetera. Like, the problem that crashed wasn't the unwrap in the Cloudflare code, from my understanding, right? The problem was that situation should have never happened in the first place, right? It's like saying, okay, we're going to allocate, I don't know, 12 gigs to this server to do something, right? Or allocate some amount of disk, right? Some SSD, right? And you have a database and it's writing out a bunch of data, and you're like, this data will never grow more than 1/10 of the size of this disk. And then for some reason, one day something goes wrong, and that service gets entirely too much traffic for some reason, and it keeps writing, and it writes until it's out of disk. What do? Right? Do you just start deleting stuff off disk? That's weird, right? Um, so yeah, I mean, I think production issues are more complicated than that, and there are a lot of decisions that people have to make. But that unwrap was not the reason they crashed. Have I met Frank Herbert, writer of the book? I have not. I've never met Frank or Fred. Sorry. Oh man, I read that and then it mistranslated in my head. I've never met Fred Herbert. Um, I didn't go to a lot of like Erlang conferences or anything. Skein stuff. I'm going to periodically check the PR just to see if there's more stuff. So the question for the PR actually. So does this mean if I register 2 extension strings on my processor and neither of them matches, then my hook gets called twice with none both times? That could get weird if the hook isn't idempotent. Yes. And I think that idempotency is a property of the implementation of the processor. Is idempotency not a word? Idempotency. It's a programming word. So it's not in the dictionary? That's unfortunate. Did I misspell this? I don't think so. Anyway. Let's see. Most extensions will select only the one they care about, but multiple, but requesting multiple is a valid behavior. If you request multiple, you have to be prepared for multiple hook calls. We could maybe abstract this to send arbitrary of extension data in one call, or we could send all extension data for all calls. But in the latter case, putting the responsibility of checking glTF data on the user. In the former case, can't think of a solution that isn't complicated. The base case being processing one extension. Anything past that is advanced user territory. Most extensions will select only ones they care about. Requesting multiple is valid behavior as well. If you request multiple, then you have to be prepared for multiple hook calls. I think if you request multiple extensions, you have to expect multiple calls. That seems reasonable to me. We could, there is an alternate design where we pick keys out of the map. But then we have to do like data reconstruction, which feels really weird. I recently came across a video regarding Go versus Rust where it said Rust's async runtimes aren't as good for IO, and therefore Go comes close in performance. What do I think? I think that I haven't seen the video and thus don't have an opinion on the data they used as a reference. You know, um, I think that for me to have an opinion on that, I would have to go watch the video and look at the data. I'm very clearly not a person who is like gonna jump on a bandwagon here. I have no idea. Like, for example, anytime you talk about benchmarks, you have to know what you're actually benchmarking, and writing good benchmarks is very hard, right? Um, you can see that with like the what is it, the Tech Empower web framework benchmarks. Um, People put so much time into making these performant to the point of like over adapting them to the benchmark. So like this benchmark doesn't actually feel like it represents reality to me. Like it doesn't feel like this would represent what I would be getting in production for a real workload to me. This is like hyper optimized code golf, in my opinion. Um, and I'm saying that with like Axum is in the top 10 there, but I still think this is hyper optimized code golf, you know? Um, there are like things you can absolutely learn from looking at how people implement these benchmarks, or not the benchmarks themselves, but like if you looked at this Axum repo, it would probably have a few tricks that you might not know about, or things that you need to care about, etc. Um, which can be useful as a learning resource. I just don't think that looking at this list and choosing a framework based on it is a good idea. requiring users, random apostrophe. Request for a rename, glTF extension processor. glTF extension handler instead? Does handler make sense? Handler makes sense to people in chat? A glTF extension handler? I think so. I think because Bevy has asset processors. glTF extension handler. Maybe that's why I thought processor was a good idea, because I had asset processing in my head already. Let me pull up this. We'll open the actual GitHub. Where do I have this repo? I have it in Bevy code open. This is the PR already opened. I really need to like get VS Code under control with these pop-ups. This is ridiculous. So we have the PR. We have a file here that defines glTF extension processor. And what we're going to do is we're going to rename this to glTF extension handler. glTF extension processor. So I just used ripgrep to find the other locations that this is going to be in, RG glTF extension processor. This is going to be in the examples, and then also one in the loader, and a couple in the lib. It's everywhere. So glTF extension processor, select all of them that are here. Handler. Let's see, via source lib. Processors. We'll rename this to handlers, I guess, too. And handler and handlers. And then we, I think, only have the examples left to fix. This is just a simple rename. Is there a way of replacing a word with another? In what sense? I mean, there's find replace, right? What I'm doing here is just a multi-select. So I'm doing a multi-cursor. Is there a way of replacing a word with another without losing the uppercase? The casing of things is not well retained by VS Code's implementation of find replace. That's the way I would frame it. I think there are other find replace implementations, such as the one in Emacs, that tend to enable some more advanced behavior. But the one in VS Code, no. I don't think you can do that in the one in VS Code. Gonna select all these processors and rename them handler. Is there a CLI one? Depends on the situation, I think. I don't think I can think of one off the top of my head, but sed keep case. It would be the thing that I would look for. This person wrote an awk script to do it. Awk is one of those things where it's like, would I suggest somebody use awk? No. Does awk find its way into being the most useful tool for some random task? Yeah. But would I suggest that you get really good at writing awk? Not really. Here's their solution using sed. That's wild. I think I would just case sensitive my replacement before I wrote this, you know? Do one replace with all lowercase and one replace with all uppercase. That if you are not already used to the new parsing. The new parsing. New shell parse, yes. Can that do case reliant? I mean, I know you can open a file, pull it into new shell, do some operation and save it back out. Oh, you didn't get the full problem? Yeah, the full problem is basically they want case insensitive, case sensitive. They want basically like if you have signature with a capital S and a signature with a lowercase s, and you do a replacement, keep the capital. Which I don't know that there's a really good answer for. This, we should probably change this as well. This is probably too verbose. We can probably just do dot resource. Right, because that'll panic anyway. glTF extension mesh 2D. Maybe I should do that after. Maybe I'll do that on a separate commit. Here's handlers. Where else do we have handlers? Extension processor, extension animation graph. Right, I happen to have all uppercase here, so I'm just selecting them all and replacing it with handler. Cargo run example, not component tests. We need cargo run example. Let's run the animation graph example. Ta-da! I know I haven't shown this to you yet, Hikasu, but this is really cool, in my opinion. The animation graph demo here. This is the spawn. So we do command spawn with the scene root in the scene. And we have an observer here that plays animations when ready, which when the scene instance ready gets called, all it does is find the animation player and play. And what we do is there is a glTF extension handler that pulls in the animations, grabs the animation roots when the animations are collected, inserts that component or that entity into the root entities. And then when the scene is completed in the loader, inserts the component with the correct graph and the index to play. So when the scene loads, it instantiates. You get the graph right on the player and you can just play it. And this will happen for all of them now. You do have to like make your own decision about how to label it. So in the examples here, I just have like a static label, but for some graph, you might want to name it or something, you know. But I'm very hyped on this. I've been working on this during the advent of code stuff. Cool. So far, so good. Hoping to get a approval at some point. But until then, we'll just keep responding to feedback. I think the release candidate is probably going to happen tomorrow. So if I can do enough work to get that in today, then it will be in the release candidate, which will be very cool because then I can like ship the glTF extension stuff with the Bevy 0.18 Skein release, which is just very cool. So that's the extension stuff. I want to make this other change too, now that I've thought about it. The way that I'm adding this in this plugin is kind of not necessary. So actually all of this can be like app world mute, resource mute, right? And this is the animation graph example. And it's playing, huzzah. You can keep state. So it's just a struct. I'm very excited about this. Let's get this also happening for the Mesh 2D. Mute extensions, resource mute, get rid of this. Do this. I guess we could have an additional utility function that's like add glTF extension handler or something to clean this up. But I don't think it matters for the first merge. Let's make sure this works. This is the glTF extension mesh 2D example. So this takes 3D meshes from like Blender or something and turns them into mesh 2Ds with a color material. This also happens to have custom attributes on the vertices. So those get retained, which is also cool to show. I do think that this is a power user tool more than a like way that everybody should do anything tool. But for the people that need it, Okay. So back to Skein stuff. So we have the extras processing working, and we have the extensions processing that we want to work. Um, so the processing is actually going to be the same, but when it happens is going to be different. If I run component tests, I need to get rid of my lock file probably. We might need to make a couple of changes because this is going to be the, how do I frame this? This is going to be the first 0.18 run of Skein. So it's possible that I have some 0.18 isms that I need to modify. I can't think of anything off the top of my head, but we'll see. It's funny because in my own projects, I always do this like extra error handling with extra error messaging. Which means that I end up writing like let some whatever and then error otherwise warn, even when I don't really need to in other projects. So far, so good. So it runs. It doesn't look like we have any warnings or anything either, which is cool. It's cool to not have to do any work to upgrade. The 0.17 and 0.18 version of Skein apparently just works with both of them, which is wild and cool. So the question becomes, right now we're doing this in on add. So we've got this Skein processing thing happening here. And I think there's two things here. One is that I could hide this behind a feature in Skein and let people turn it on if they want it. But I also think it's zero overhead otherwise. So just having it on is fine too. And then if you have both of them on, then both of them will process. But if you export the extensions and the extras, that will be a weird situation, right? Can we detect that? I don't know. Did I model that wolf? And did I do it in Blender? I did not model that wolf, and I don't know where it was built. The wolf is the wolf that we use for like random Bevy stuff. So it's like if you run any bone animation or skinning example in the Bevy repo, it'll have that wolf in it. I think it's a fox, but same thing. So I think actually all we're going to do here is in the Skein plugin, we can do the same thing that I wrote in the example. It's Firefox then. You have a PR on bone attachments that has the fox with a mohawk and a jacket. You really? I don't know why I got so excited about that, but I'm excited about both bone attachments, and that's the issue. This has been a long running thing. How did you implement bone attachments? Entity commands attach a scene to an entity. Don't we already have that? Isn't that just... How did I initially learn the shader things? Trial and error, really. This is cool. This is the little mohawk in the jacket. I love that. The way I learned shader things is trial and error, building things. I built things with Bevy, I built things with WGPU, etc. If you're trying to get into shader stuff and you're trying to get into shader stuff with Bevy specifically, I highly suggest going to check out the shader directory, which has a whole bunch of different shader examples. It is not like a tutorial series or anything, so you'll have to do some of your own work. And then once you got through that, there's a couple of probably easier end or lower end examples in the advanced section that will teach you a little bit more about Bevy's internals and stuff like that. Which can also be very cool. And then from there, basically any shader stuff on the internet will work, right? If you know how to get data into and out of a Bevy shader, then anything that you want to do, like, hey, I want to either generate noise in a shader or I want to use a texture or something like that, those all become more straightforward and you can do a lot of stuff with fairly little. Spawn two glTFs on the scene spawn in the second scene, change the animation player to be the first glTF player. PR was explorational. Okay, yeah. It did get split up into 2 other PRs? I guess they're mentioned down here then. Split, oh, the animation target split. Yeah, I remember that. Add Bevy glTF settings for animation player and target creation. Okay, thank you. You're just looking for more general. Been trying to for like 5 years, but it's a bit intimidating. Yeah, it is tough. It's definitely intimidating. I think that finding an environment that you enjoy working with is big. If Bevy is your thing, then the Bevy Discord is very helpful. If you post help threads and ask questions, people actually answer them. If you are more of like a Unreal or, Godot or your Unity or something like that, there's a lot of other material out there for different things. So like, I know that there's like the Unity shader Bible or whatever, which has a bunch of random stuff. This is just like scrolling textures and some other stuff like that. But it's also not too expensive. There's also like anywhere that has a shader that you are interested in probably has somebody talking about how they did it. People who do things in Blender, especially if they're doing things with like geometry nodes, will start talking about how they modeled the data flow for that thing. People who are doing Substance Designer, Substance Material, or Material Maker, or like texture creation, those can be pretty useful to check out. There's the Book of Shaders, but I don't think the Book of Shaders has gotten a chapter since I learned how shaders worked. I think that this book has not gotten any better, or like better is the wrong word. I think that this has not gotten a chapter since I went through it for the first time. But it does have some interesting stuff, right? What is here is cool. It uses GLES, so that's the thing. But yeah, basically, there's a lot of sources where people are doing things that are not exactly what you're doing, right? If you're working with Unity or you're working with Bevy or whatever, they're not going to be exactly what you're doing. But the learning process is looking at what somebody else is doing, following their reasoning and their logic and like through what they're actually doing, and then figuring out how to translate that into whatever environment you like working with. You can learn a lot by doing that. And there's a lot of people on YouTube who do things and talk about it. So yeah. So the book of shaders, you're pretty much looking for TypeScript. Is that what you're looking for? Is that what TS is for? Then pivoting to some Zig. I think TypeScript. If you're a TypeScript person, you might check out 3JS. 3JS has a bunch of examples and stuff, and will let you start probably writing some shaders. This is probably where I would tell somebody who is like trying to use TypeScript to start. Look through these examples, check out what they're doing, start trying to make your own stuff. And if you're a TypeScript developer, then you know how the web works. So just start throwing stuff on like a static site. Here's example today, here's example for tomorrow, whatever, right? There's a thing coming up that is January with a bunch of prompts. So if you're having trouble trying to like figure out what to make, come here during January, whenever they release, this year's prompts. They will have actual prompts. Yeah, they haven't actually shown up yet. It's weird that they have ChatGPT on the homepage. That's really, I don't like that. But they will post some prompts in January, and you might be able to find some inspiration and just do something every day and post it. I can't fathom why you would mention that tool on a site meant for artistic people. Um, doo, doo, doo. Oh, this was only last week. Okay. That's why it doesn't have any review or anything. I feel like I'm hesitant in general about this. This is retargeting. Is that what this is supposed to be? I feel like the goal here feels weird. I mean, I get it, but like using multiple glTFs is not a use case, right? So the fact that that's the first thing for this feels awkward. And bone attachments is just parenting, right? And this doesn't have bone attachments, does it? So I'm just reading through this. If it is not skinned. Oh, yeah. Gotcha. This needs an example. I don't I don't know. I feel weird about the increasing the amount of complexity that is in the animation API right now. This doesn't I think the thing that's bugging me is that this doesn't feel like it's making anything simpler. It's just adding more options. It's funny you were just working with glTF animations. It is kind of whack. The glTF animation API in Bevy right now is low level, is the issue. 2 GLTF seems yuck. I mean, I could see somebody having a bunch of characters, right, as different glTFs and loading them in when somebody selects them or something. But um, I think that multiple glTFs as like the primary use case for doing something isn't like, it's not the use case. The use case is retargeting animations, right? That PR specifically just allows you to have the animation target component always added to the bones, even if there is no animation on that one glTF. Okay. I feel like there. I feel like we should just always do it if it's going to be. I don't know. Maybe the modularity is useful. I obviously haven't done a thorough review or a thorough like read of the code or anything, so take everything I'm saying with a grain of gigantic salt. Oh, there's your response to exactly what I said. That's funny. I do like enabling third-party crates to do things. So Agreeable needs to push for some review on this other one. Maybe I'll do a review on the other one if I can find the time. I'm saying that I'm going to do a review. I don't think I have the time, but I will try to find the time. Guess if many models share the same animation, it makes sense. Yeah, if you have a bunch of characters in different glTF files and you load one based on whatever the user chose or something like that, makes sense. One body, 10 shirts, things like that. Yeah, obviously. Yeah. I think we should lead with the use case of multiple shirts on a body or multiple characters with the targeting. I think the implication that this could allow you to store animations in a separate glTF file is not the use case, right? The use case is animation retargeting. And bone, whatever the word is. Why am I getting? I'm trying to keep track of my pings today so that I can work with this PR. So if we do that, then I think we have everything running. I've already pushed the other commits, so I think we have the right stuff here. Let's do struct. glTF extension handler Skein. That's what we're going to do here. That's what I was going to do before I flipped back to actually looking at all the other stuff. We need this, and we need this down here, impl glTF extension handler. So this dying clone, I don't see a way to default this to the trait. Maybe there is a way and I just didn't see it. I'm hoping somebody who has uh, more object safety, dying compatibility experience can come up with a way. Where you can prepare an animation, you can specify which glTF is mono, which is animation. It could be the same one. Yeah. You wanted to ask, hope you're doing well as well. Oh no, by the way. Wanted to ask, is it possible for Skein someday to give animators control over game state through animation? For example, they could give hitboxes a damage or size component and change it through something like an F curve, like 100% damage at frame 20 versus 30% damage at the last frame. It's a good question. I don't think that you would need Skein for that. Maybe you would. Let's see. I'm trying to think about how you would export the curves. I think it needs some research. I think that I'm open to the idea. You would have to be basically animating component data based on an exported curve, right? So you can export curves that can be sampled in the glTF. I don't know how you're going to reference them, but that's a solvable problem, I think. I think we could potentially do it. I think we could do it. I don't know that we can do it tomorrow, but I think we can do that generally speaking. I think it's possible to do that. I haven't thought about doing that before right now. But I think it's possible. It's an interesting thing that I would be interested in diving into. Is where I'll leave it. It's got me thinking a little bit. Also thinking about like, do you want to tie that game logic to that curve? Actually, you want to be able to like specify it somewhere, right? So like it makes sense. I'm open to the idea for sure. Next things on my list for Skein are light maps, some UX improvements. So it would come after that for my own work. But if somebody wanted to look into it to see how we could do it, I would be very interested in reviewing that work, is the way that I'll frame it. One of the things that I really care a lot about is making sure that Skein updating like to new Bevy versions and new Blender versions is really easy. So the review process might be might be tough, but definitely open to the idea. What was I doing? The implementation? No, I wasn't doing the implementation yet. Let's do the implementation. I need to copy this. Make sure I can actually access this. Did I mess up and not make this pub? Or do I have an old version? Why is there no action available? There's clearly an error here. I feel like VS Code is just not doing it for me more and more. Let me check this PR in case I did something really silly. Pub trait in extensions. I think it has to be public for the example to work. I don't think the example would work if it wasn't public. I just noticed, are you standing, Chris? Aren't you using a chair? No, I stand for all my streams. I stand for all my streams and I stand for all my meetings and I stand for all my video calls and things like that. Something that I like just personally kind of committed to, and now out of habit, I just kind of do it. And I think that it's pretty it's a pretty good option for me personally. Makes sure that I get up, makes sure that I stand around, walk around, you know, move a little bit. Better than sitting in the chair for hours and hours and hours on end, you know? Um, Rust Analyzer has been responding very poorly on Codium as well. Yeah. Yeah, I don't know. NeoVim? NeoVim's a possibility. I mean, like, I used to be, so I did Vim before I did Emacs, and then I found Emacs and I liked Emacs more, so I did Emacs for a long time. I switched to VS Code because making videos and streams and stuff like that, people, if I use too much like Emacsisms or NeoVim isms, people can't follow what I'm doing. If I click around with the mouse in VS Code, people understand what I'm doing. Which is, yeah. Haha, yeah, you'd imagine it takes some work, but you're thinking about storing it in a file memory instead of sampling it. But you're an artist and very newbie programmer. You don't know which would be better. Yeah. So we can store that data in the glTF file. And with this glTF extension handling that I'm working on right now, we can definitely like turn that into a curve and expose that to Bevy as like an asset of some kind. So like, that's all possible. All those things make sense. How the actual implementation shakes out, I don't know, but it's all possible. It's a great initiative for a healthier life. Yeah, I don't know. I used to be significantly more into working out and lifting and everything. Olympic lifting is really my bag. It's hard to find places to do Olympic lifting. Is really my issue. I had a barbell club in 2020, right before that thing that happened in the world. And I was doing Olympic lifting competitions I was going to, which was very fun. But then everything shut down and my gym closed. So I haven't, it's 5 years later and I haven't found a barbell club. But I'm about to get back into it. That's one of my things for the new year. I don't really do New Year's resolutions, but I really need to get back into Olympic lifting. So what is my problem here? I should have access to this. Oh, you know what? I probably don't have Bevy glTF. Let's see if I can pull it from. Yeah, glTF extension handlers. glTF extension. Did I really mess up? I think I didn't re-export this. How could I have possibly done that and gotten the example to work though? Check the lib.rs. Hub use. Everything in loader. Loader has, yeah, pub use. Oh, pub use crate. That's not supposed to be pub use crate. This has to be public. PubMob prelude. Wait, so is it in the prelude and not? Should this then be in the prelude? I feel like it should be. glTF extension handler. Instruct. Okay, so the question here is, do I pub use this or do I feel like I didn't realize there was a prelude. Yeah, glTF extension handler. I don't know why that was so difficult to find. Perils of like so these are in different positions now, which is weird and awkward. And I think that's something I should fix in the PR. I don't know if this prelude gets included in the Bevy prelude. Is really the thing that's coming to mind. Like when you do use Bevy prelude star, I don't know if that includes the things in the Bevy glTF prelude or not. Or if that's a separate thing. So I'll make a note of that. Things are accessible now, so I think it's fine. But that is awkward and weird, and I should fix that. So these are all of the, I love Rust Analyzer for this. This is just all of the hooks templated out for that trait. The Dyn clone is something that I don't think we can default, unfortunately. The Dyn clone thing is really an unfortunate workaround for trait objects. Did you make a note? Doc hidden makes things not subject to completion as well as hiding them from the docs. Yeah. It's really weird. When you're using, I'm using individual crates, right? So like makes sense in some level. But now I'm not sure if this should go in the prelude or not. Right? Like these other things aren't in the prelude. But this is. So what is the purpose of the individual crate prelude if it's hidden from the docs? That's only what gets exported in the Bevy core crate. Is that accurate? Let's actually look at that lib.rs. I never look in this, but yeah, Bevy internal star. That's what I expected. Crates, internal. lib prelude. Lib is all of the stuff. You know, as you're like Bevy : glTF, Bevy : you know, et cetera, et cetera. Prelude. Okay, so that's the difference. I don't know if it matters then. Should this even be in the prelude? Is a great question. Most people won't need it. In your opinion, is a bug anytime a library forces you to import something from a prelude and not a non-prelude path? So does that mean that you consider this prelude setup to be buggy? Like all these crates? Um, because of the way that they're hidden like this? I think that at the very least, I think that's what you're saying at least. Like this should be possible. And it's not currently possible. So that'll be the note that I make to myself to fix. Are the glTF extras defined in the root? No, they're not. So they are coming from pub use loader star or assets star. Assets star. So assets has those and they're just pub sitting in here. Yeah. Yeah, they're just pub sitting in assets. So that means that my extensions or my trait that's in extensions, which is pub, comes up through loader mod. Which I am fully qualifying for kicks, I guess. Hub crate mod extensions. So do we have access to extensions here? No. What's the difference? Why is it bad? I'll cover that in a second. No, you mean there should be a path to the item you want that does not contain the word prelude. Yeah, because that's the real path, right? Especially for like reflection, it uses not the non-prelude path, the non-re-export. The purpose of prelude modules is to be able to use foo prelude star. You should not be obligated to use them in other ways. I agree with that. And you should not be obligated to use star at all. Therefore, preludes should not be mandatory. All items should be neatly organized, non-prelude paths to them. I agree with that. I think that the answer then here is that this shouldn't be pub crate. This should just be pub. And then there is a couple of things in here that are pub crate, which are internal. And then the trait definition and the clone implementation. I think, no, I'm not going to say that, but the clone issue is something that I want to fix too. I think that's the answer. I think having this be accessible at the extensions module is the right move. So this is actually what I want. I want pub mod extensions here. And then lib.rs, loader. This pulls loader for everything. So take this out of prelude, I think. Because if you're writing an extension, you can just go straight to extensions and import these two things. And if you're not writing an extension, then you'll never need it. So it shouldn't really be in the prelude. All that said, for your own non-star used coding, you write Bevy prelude as B, which is a kind of mix of things. Cool. I haven't really seen that much. I guess that's to avoid the namespace collisions that preludes come with. So I think that this then glTF extension handler, we can bring that into scope and that's fine. And then this will all be accessible via extensions. So let's run mesh 2D. Hopefully I get an error here. Yeah. Not found in scope, which is good, right? Because glTF extension, animation graph, we are not pulling these in, right? So then this would be glTF extensions. And we only have the handler here, but we need both. So let me go back to yes, but not just namespace collisions. It also avoids the code being illegible to people who are unfamiliar with, oh, that's a Bevy standard thing. Or is that a Bevy or a standard thing? Yeah. Code should be written to be read. Yes, I totally agree with that, I think. How should I reframe this? There are practices that serve short-term convenience and authoring experience at the expense of being able to read it, such as one of the ones that I'm familiar with is in the Webpack ecosystem, or like the JavaScript ecosystem in general, but Webpack specifically included a feature to specify a folder as like a global namespace that just gets made available everywhere. And I've always thought that was a terrible idea because those names can overlap and you never find out. And it's hard to tell where things are coming from, whether it's coming from like, because that module global namespace then can collide with any package that you use from npm at any time. Bevy asset, Bevy. So extension handler is here. The resource is actually not in this file. Should it be? Should I move it? I think that the place I happened to put it while I was developing the feature is just in the root, right? The root of that wasn't what I meant. Where is my resource? Resource. glTF extension handlers. In lib. So the resource is here at the root. But realistically, this should probably be in the extensions. Because if you're going to try to use this, that's where you're going to import the other thing from. And let's see, the only usage is in this file. That's why I put it here in the first place. So I think either having them in two different places feels really weird from a usage perspective. They either both go in the prelude, or I move this to be in the extensions and I import it here. And I think that's what I'm going to do. I think that this resource should be defined here. Because in that case, then you can pull these two things at the same time for your import. And from a user perspective, like, where are glTF extension handlers used? Oh, well, they get put into this resource that's right next to it. And that reads much better rather than having them in two different places. That doesn't mean we need to pull it in. And we get both of them here, right? Of which we only need one because we only use this, or do I specify this in multiple ways? I think I only use this. I think that makes sense. So let's run with that. And then this, we pull in like that. And then this is a very not often used path, right? Like this is, you're going to write this for like one file out of your entire project or one library across a set of projects. So I think having it deep in here and not in the prelude is fine. glTF extension handlers struct is private. Defined here, create extensions. Oh yeah, okay, that's that's because it exists in that root spot. So Cargo or Rust is finding it and telling me, hey, this thing that it happens to be there, like it is there, it's just not public. Instead of telling me that like I should import it from the other URL. And this is in which file? Mesh 2D. So we're in animation right now. And then this is going to be Mesh 2D. And we aren't going to need to qualify that. Every time I say qualified, I think of koalas. Cool, so that works. And this animation graph should still work. So we do have access to them. We now have access to them in the same place. I think that's significantly better. Let me just check the code that I've written here. It should just be moving these things around. I took it out of the prelude, which I think is fine. We could put it in the prelude, but like, it's probably not going to conflict with anything. I feel like I don't have a good handle on whether people want Bevy's prelude to be all encompassing or not encompassing. Like, I don't know where the 80% line is for Bevy's prelude. I lean towards not including this in the prelude because it's going to live in one file, basically, right? Like, you're going to write this code once. So having it deeper and not in the prelude makes sense. That should be an excuse to use a koala instead of the fox in your examples. Maybe I'll model a koala sometime. So we made the extensions module public. There's only two things in that are public. The extension paths are updated correctly. I think this is all good. I'm gonna push that up. That's why it's important to like use it from a third-party project. I would have spent more time on this PR if the 0.18 release wasn't coming tomorrow. So this should be the setup for Bevy glTF, which I think is good. After this PR merges, I want to make another PR for another example too. I think that there's a lot of interesting extension examples and that the current examples could probably be more sophisticated. Show off the functionality a little bit even better. Interesting. What did we see there? I think that's good. Unresolved or unlinked module create Bevy? Hang on a second. Where did I have? Ah, these all got pulled in with their full. Interesting. That's fine for other people. That is not fine for us. This is Bevy asset and this is Bevy animation. And we're probably going to wrap this implementation in like a if animation is enabled kind of thing. Let's get rid of all the prefixes actually and handle it all at the top. Later, Zuzu. Bevy asset, load contacts. This is passed in quite a few times. Delete those. PBR. Why is it really wants to use full paths? It's fine. We'll just use this as a way to basically move them all at the same time to the top. This is going to be the glTF crate, which we don't actually have here. This is one thing that was interesting. I think that Defining a glTF extension means that we kind of have to have a dependency on the glTF crate itself. What is Bevy's current version? One four zero. Extensions is already enabled. It's always been enabled. Um, there's a couple of extensions that are like built into the glTF crate that Bevy also uses. Some of these have like specific functions, like KHR likes punctual, and I guess the variance one isn't enabled. But a couple of these have like specific functions to fetch their data. So actually, one of the things that is a little bit weird about this is that the glTF crate only gives you access to all of the other extensions. I don't know why. I feel like it should just hold the other data as well. But that is true. It will only give you access to extensions it doesn't have implementations built in for. Otherwise, you need to call the appropriate function on the glTF node. Okay, so animation, asset, image, and PBR. These are all things. These are all things that Skein doesn't currently rely on. So I think the question here is how many crates do you need to depend on before it makes sense to depend on the Bevy crate itself? Let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Like we have 7 Bevy crates here. We're going to add 4 more right now. 11 crates out of the 50 or so that are in the Bevy. So we depend on a fifth of Bevy. Plus the remote. I think the remote dependency might be the kicker there. I don't know if we can enable that feature. I think we have to do this via crate dependency. I don't think we can we enable that feature via our feature? Maybe. I think I'm just going to add them as dependencies for now and rethink it later when it makes. So for now, we'll just add all these in. Cargo toml. I need to close that directory. I keep clicking in the wrong cargo toml. Cool. Let's run this. We'll get a couple more dependencies in here. I feel like the conversation about whether ecosystem crates should depend on fewer Bevy crates or the Bevy package itself will go on for at least a couple more years. Having the specialized implementations for specific extension is more efficient to deserialize. This is a general Serday thing, not particularly glTF. You don't use Serday value if not needed. Oh, that makes sense. That makes sense. This is the the third node that we have in scope, I think. Cool. So theoretically, we have everything here. Root data on the extensions is like, what's the name of the code extension you use for the cargo TOML crate versions? I don't know. Let me check. I could absolutely could not tell you. I installed it years ago and haven't touched it. Rust Analyzer is not it. I'm just getting an overview of all of my installed extensions here. It's like cargo something or other. This extension is no longer available. No. Small tools, VS Code, SFO. Oh, you think it's Dependy? I remember I had one version and then I think it got deprecated and then I had to switch to something else and it might have been Dependy. Yeah, Rust is supported here. There was a controversy when the author switched to a commercial model along with deprecating the old version. Oh yeah, for the other crate. Yeah, I mean, I can't fault anybody for trying to make their rent, you know? So yeah, I think this is it. And then I don't really like I don't know that I really use it, right? Like every once in a while I come in here and it's like, "Ah, yes, this is out of date." I'm like, "Cool." Like I'm not going to upgrade Insta right now. Um and if I was doing like a dependency upgrade, I would go check or maybe I would run renovate or something if I was that kind of person. I hate getting the PRs from renovate though. I like when my GitHub notifications are like always actionable PR review and stuff. So I don't like getting more notifications from dependency upgrade bots. I don't want to manage a list of repos that have dependency upgrades and not. If it's just a patch update, you can dismiss the warning doing cargo update. Yeah. I mean, that would update the lock file, right? Okay, so there's a whole bunch of things that have extension data on them from Skein. Let me finish my implementation here, actually, which I didn't do. Got distracted thinking about import paths. So the Skein plugin will then add the handler extension. I think a good follow-up might be actually to have a function on app. If people like the PR and it gets merged, have a function on app that ends up being like app register glTF extension or something like that. Because that would clean up all of this. All of that would go away, basically. So let's do a debug for scene loaded. And the one thing that I do want to do here is we actually have an extension ID. So I'm going to process Bevy Skein specifically. I think that I might do light maps as like a different extension. I was thinking about this as I was designing this, basically. So like, it's possible that light map data is not tied to the Skein components data. If they both exist, then you can use one onto the other, but they could be used separately as well. And I think that as more extensions get built, the way that migration would happen from one to another. So like theoretically, let's say somebody built something that's just like so much better than Skein for whatever reason. And they wanted to support what Skein does. If you are using Skein, you should be able to like port to this new thing without really any effort, right? They should be able to list Bevy Skein here and then handle the processing, which I think is just generally good for the ecosystem, right? There is like the ability to add support for things that other crates do with new or different implementations without having to change the way the data is represented. You configure Renovate or Dependabot to tell you about updates for only major incompatible versions for libraries, because those are the ones that may actually matter if I don't do them. Yeah, actually, the thing I have in the back of my head is getting into like this week in Bevy stuff. I do a lot of like tracking of crates and things like that. And one of the things that I kind of want to do is actually track the cargo crates.io registry subset for things myself. That's what I actually want to do. I have some scaffold code to do that kind of thing. But basically pull down that Git repo and just keep it up to date. And when things update, fire off a couple notifications. That would help me a lot, not just for this week in Bevy stuff, but also just generally speaking. Like if WGPU does a major release, or Iced does a major release, or something like that, then I can be notified about, like, for Dioxys does a release or something like that. Does a lot of help for the kind of content side of things that I do. I don't have anybody else doing like data collection, data entry, or editing for me. So anything that I can automate in that sense is really, really helpful for me. Okay, so where does this have the extension data on it? This is on a node that is a cube, which has a mesh. So actually, So I didn't do any refactoring in this PR. One of the interesting things that happens is that, yes, this is a node, but this will not fire the on node hook. This fires the on spawn mesh and material hook because Bevy specially handles nodes with meshes on them. We've also got this light, which in this case is a, am I blanking? This light is a point light. So theoretically, if I wanted to, I guess that would be useful now that I think about it. We're never going to get that data, right? So there's no global Bevy Skein data. And if I did something like KHR likes punctual here, I don't think I get this because of the way that the glTF crate works. Yeah. So this fires twice for the root, but it doesn't have any data because that data gets pulled out because of what Kevin said earlier, because it was more performant for them to do that. So one of the things that could be interesting is adding another argument here. That's like a glTF node for the root data, or just firing this with everything. I think that most people aren't going to have multiple. So having like the glTF or like the document here makes more sense because you can just ignore the document if you're getting the value. But this is the one that should spawn with the data. And the issue here is going to be that the handling of this specific kind of node has multiple things going into that entity. So it has mesh extension data and it has material extension data. So this is mesh, not mesh data. That's the wrong thing for that. Why did everything break suddenly? Mesh. That's what I want. Right, I should probably have this as a constant in my project. Somewhere way up here, maybe. Const extension. Right? And then everywhere that we want to access the extension in kind of a custom way, we'll use that instead. Like this. Right. You know what I always forget? I always forget that let chains don't have this, but they only have it for if let chains. And I can't get it through my head that it only works for if let. So I always stare at this doing let first and just get confused. I guess technically it would be written like this, right? But like, I don't know. It just feels weird that that doesn't work. I hope it comes in. I hope it happens at some point. So we'll debug the ext data here. Run this. It looks like we don't get any for that mesh data. Is it not on the mesh? It's on the node, isn't it? So there's two things that I want to do. One of them is I want to do this on node. This is not .mesh anymore. This is just going to be value. And thus we get this, that, and the other thing on all of these objects. I guess we don't have mesh data on these in this demo. We only have it on nodes. Let's entity.get name as well. So this is the camera, this is the light, and this is the cube node. Which would mean that the object with the mesh and the material is the child of this node. You haven't watched the Bevy and Bender project or yours in a while. Any way you can check out how far it's gotten? Oh, you mean Blenvy? Blenvy's gone. Blenvy has been undeveloped for about a year now, I think. 10 months. And it was kind of floating a little bit before this too. Unfortunate, but I think the maintainer just got busy with life and stuff. If you're looking for Bevy Skein stuff, which is the new project that I built, you can check out the doc site, bevyskein.dev, which has all the documentation. I've been really busy due to Advent of Code. Yeah, Advent of Code preventing me from doing anything, including sleeping. So this logic is basically what I need. I kind of want this to, so this is going to be the same thing, more or less. I namespaced it in the extension to have the components key. I don't know if that was a good idea. I think it was a good idea. I'm trying to like leave myself some room for experimentation moving forward. But I guess this is like kind of the same as just having another extension as well. We only have the one extension though, so this will be, it's going to be a prototype. So I'm probably just going to pull this. We're doing the from string on the extras here to get it. If it's an object, we work with it. If not, then we don't. I think that this is iterating over all the strings. Right? If we look at the types here, this is all string query entity error. So this is Saturday JSON from string object. This is the object that is the wrapper for the Skein data currently. So because Skein is embedded in extras right now, we have to look for this object first. And we have to do .get Skein out of that object because that's like the extras object. So we can start here and basically do this part of it. And this is just error handling for extras. And in all of these locations, we're going to have to do this. So I think this is going to be a function that is like insert components that takes an entity that is a mutable reference to a entity world mute. This is the logic. We don't need to continue. This is just going to be a return. I guess we could have a result here, but realistically, this is not going to do anything if it fails. The only thing that's going to happen here is that this is going to return. You're back. Welcome back. So we're going to have the entity. We're going to have the data. The data is going to be just the Faraday JSON value, right? We avoid doing the serialization as a whole. I think there probably could be a way to serialize this in a batch, but we avoid it intentionally because if one component isn't registered in the registry or something like that, or one component fails, we don't necessarily want to break all of the components that are in the batch. Probably got rid of that on the up here too, didn't I? Cool. World has to come in as well. I thought I named this scene world. I feel like I should name that scene world in the PR. So this is going to be like get components. And this does a little bit of logging and tries to use the name of the entity that we're processing. I think in 0.18 we have like a, what is it? Like an entity or name debug or something like that. So maybe I will just let this slide for a second. This is going to be entity. Entity.id is going to be meaningless here though. Entity.id here is going to be the ID in the scene world. And that is, I think, functionally fairly meaningless without knowing what scene it's in. So the debugging here is going to get a little bit harder using this approach. I don't know how to recover that necessarily. Unrelated, but what about extension versioning and backward compatibility? Like versioning the extension itself? I don't put any root data in the Bevy Skein extension data right now. But I could throw a version in there easily. I haven't had to break it yet. So my thought right now is I can float without a version in those places until I need to break it, and then I check for the version when I implement it. Sort of a like don't do it before I need it kind of thing. The extension itself hasn't had to deal with that yet. But I could see it. I could see it. I think that one of the things that protects us from that is the Blender extension knows what version of Bevy it's talking to. So based on what version of Bevy you're talking to, I know, because we created all the Rust crates and stuff, what the Rust crate is capable of doing, and thus which version to output. So in that sense, I'm basically doing versioning based on the Bevy release. And in the Skein Blender extension code is a little switch statement, basically. That's like, if 16 do this, if 17 do that. And I try to get that extension published before, 0.1819 goes out, so that the upgrade is smooth. So I think, due to the way that I have it set up, I'm not sure I actually need versioning on the extension. The data format itself, I don't see changing at the moment. I have to put a little bit more thought into the extension data here, because right now I'm doing this thing where it is a components key into an array of objects, and I'm doing that with an eye towards light map baking and stuff like that, because I don't know currently where I'm going to put the light map data. It has to go somewhere. It has to go on like this mesh material entity that's getting created in this hook. The light map will have to be a component on that entity at some point. So open questions for light maps are, we can generate them in Blender and it works. There's some questions around customizability and whatnot that I'm kind of kicking down the road, just doing a minimal implementation first. Those images, should we store them in the blend file and pack them into the blend file, or should we let them go and not include them? I know you can always go in and like delete them and whatnot. So I'm leaning towards packing them into the blend file, but it does mean that every time you bake a bunch of images that it gets saved into the blend file, which makes the blend file larger. And it makes the blend file larger because of derived data, which is, yeah, I mean, I think there are open questions there. I don't think I'm going to have the perfect answer. I think putting it in the blend file by default means that it will just work for everybody that uses it. And I could work backwards to more advanced configurations later. I don't know. We'll see. I don't know. So we have to store those images. We have to associate them with these meshes and the materials and stuff. And we have to process them in these hooks. So the question is, how do you guarantee that for a given light map that it will be used on the correct object, especially when it comes to, say, instancing, right? Because light maps kind of break instancing, is my understanding. So if you have light maps and you have a mesh that they need to be associated with a material, then the entity that the light map has to be associated with is the constructed group entity for that mesh and material, which we only have because it's only constructed in the glTF loader, right? Similar thing for relationships. We don't actually have the entity IDs until the glTF loader creates them. So using the extension approach, one of the reasons that I want to get the extension merged upstream is because I don't see relations working for components without having the extension-based approach. I don't see a reasonable solution for that using glTF extras and mutating scene worlds like outside of the loader. The relationships issue is kind of a thorny one, but we can collect all of the data as these nodes go by, right? Every time we do on glTF node, for example, or on spawn mesh and material, we get these glTF nodes. These nodes have the index that they are. And we can get the extension data. So we have the index and we have the data. And if we have other data to associate, then we can build a map from the identifiers that we choose to use for whatever reason to these glTF identifiers. And then when the scene is completed, right, on scene completed, we use that built up map to apply all of the light map components to the relevant entities directly. Because here we have access to the scene world and we have the root ID. So we can just iterate over the scene world or do world.entity_mute if we've built up a map. And we can basically insert all those light map components where they need to go, having built up all of the data already. Because on scene completed only gets called after all of the entities that make up the scene have been put into it. Anyway, yeah, I'm just kind of rambling at this point. Things are coming together and it's exciting. What was I doing? The type registry. We need the type registry. How are we going to get the type registry? Actually, now that I think about it, how are we going to get the type registry? We need the type registry. Do we need the type registry? I think we do. How do we get the type registry? We will have entity world mute in a bunch of these places. I think we have to. I was thinking about restricting access when I built the extension. I was thinking about restricting access. And then the more I thought about it, the faster the ideas came in for why that wouldn't work. And the reality is that I think it would only work for extremely simple use cases. If you are going to do anything interesting, you have to have this world access. Right? Actually, now that I'm thinking about it, that's missing on scene completed. And this entity world mute is the wrong entity world. So how do we get the type registry is really the question here. I think that's a pretty serious question, actually. We're getting the type registry here. Is there any chance that giving an arc here would work? App type registry is an arc, right? Type registry arc, derefs to the type registry. I don't think we ever need mutable access to this, so the arc is fine. I think holding the arc doesn't interfere with anything. Does the app type registry exist when we need it to? When does the app type registry get inserted? Not to here. Where does it get inserted? Impl deref init resource app type registry. Nope, that's a test. Scene, hot patch, serialization. Tell me it just gets like randomly built inside of a world and that's why I'm missing it. Get or init. This has got to be a test. That's benches. Auto register. Bevy app. App default and it's the registry. Perfect. So if you have an app that you are building plugins in, then the app will have the registry. So this is going to be resource. Type registry. Right. And then this is really an arc. Does this implement the arc is inside of it? Is this actually an arc? Where's this type? It isn't actually an arc. Cool. Remove this wrapper once we migrate to atelier assets. What is atelier assets? Hang on. Atelier assets? this. That comment is out of date. I guess I found myself another PR to make because this isn't happening. Not a future me problem. Let this guy handle it. Yeah, exactly. So type registry arc, internal is arc, and the internal is pub. So I think that that's what we want. What just happened? Where's my... Oh, type registry. There we go. So this then dot internal dot clone gives us an arc read write lock type registry. Can we hold that? Read write lock makes me nervous about our ability or our capacity to do this. Let me try to comment this stuff out for a second and just see if we can get this data in here. In a way that we can actually use. So this then needs to be constructed. Not by default, but by type registry. So maybe I can just do this. That broke my formatting. So maybe I just keep these next to each other. Why is my formatting broken? I still have a syntax error, don't I? Where's the syntax error? So type registry arc. And does that even run? I feel like the Rust Analyzer just hasn't caught up to it not being able to run. Type registry. Type registry. Type registry. Reflect type registry. Read write lock from sync. Dot read dot iter dot count. And hopefully we don't see a 0. And hopefully this runs, are the two things in my mind. Type registry read iter count 1. That seems bad. Unless what I'm iterating over is not what I think I'm iterating over. Oh, what am I? Let's see. Docs, type registry. There's read. Oh, arc is read. Never mind. Sorry. So read, write, lock is read and write as separate things. So we're using read, we're getting that guard. The guard then contains that read access. So let me do this just to check results. We want to unwrap this. Read light rock, read guard, type registry, read.iter.count. And, you know, it would help if I actually debugged the value. Let that be, you know, pro tips with Chris. If you don't debug the value, it won't show where the debug logs happen. Cool. That's the count we want. 865 read iter count. This feels good. This feels better anyway. So we do have access to the type registry. I love that somebody, I don't know who it was, had the foresight to put this in an arc read write lock. But I love whoever that was. Cool, which is really good for us. That is really good for us. So this is what we're going to use. Where are we doing this? We're doing this in, I guess, spawn. Let's do this in glTF node to start, right? That's where we have all these logs. So this is going to be, I don't even remember what I called this. Insert components. Insert components. Value. Well, let some value equals value. Oh man, the Brian David Gilbert skit just popped into my head. Where he that's really funny. Let some else return insert components entity type registry, right? And this type is going to be read write lock, read guard type registry. We should be able to deref that, right? Cool. So we have a type registry. We have all the stuff we need. Let's get into actually doing this. This is our type registry read call in here. We could throw the arc in here instead. I think that it's not super worth it. But we could. And then this is going to be entity insert reflect directly. Right? So if we run this, hopefully this doesn't panic. Resource does not exist. App type registry. I thought, let's check our application construction here. But now, if this doesn't exist when we need it to, the downside is there is no plugin ordering. The finalization happens in Finish for the glTF extension processor. And the construction of the type registry happens in the app default call. New calls default, if I remember correctly. Spacing out even looking at these examples. So we have these plugins, right? Skein plugin, default plugins. App new, this should call default, so that resource should exist there, right? So we're panicking on our read call then? Resource does not exist feels like a error message that was written for the typical use case that we are not currently engaging in. So read on type registry arc gives us that internal or poisons it. Makes sense. We have a read write lock here. So if something goes wrong, poisoning sounds right. So the read action here, if I can get back into the right file. We're saying it doesn't exist here, right? No, it's somewhere else. Where is it faulty? We get through to the cube, which is cool. Did I just mess this up? I did just mess this up. I'm not even in the right part of the file. That's what happens when you duplicate code. Did I do this correctly? Type registry. This read call is the one that's breaking. I know we don't see that in like any error message or whatever, but it's the only place we're calling the read. Oh, maybe not. Resource does not exist. Hang on. Did I leave a random? Is this going to be the issue? Read doesn't take that, right? How do I debug this? Read, write, lock, arc, internal, clone. We could, I guess. Type registry should have the clone on it too, right? I don't really need the app type registry moving forward, but because like we just need this internal. I guess should we be using this instead? I don't think there's anything this is doing for us. Maybe there is. Get type registration. Self new for type registry. Type registry arc has a read and a write, but it's just calling read on the internal. The type registry impulse default and empty. What do I actually have down here? This is a arc read write lock type registry. So I could turn this into a clone, but then that turns into a type app type registry. I don't really want an app type registry. I don't think anyway. Type registry arc. Maybe at least make this so read here does the unwrap for us, which is cool. But that's still, we get a different error message using the different API, or I think it's the same API, but I have almost literally never used Rust backtrace. I feel like this is a rare like there's no information for me to go on. Futures light, asset server, future poll, related methods, glTF handler Skein, 483. That's insert components. At load node, load glTF, related methods. World resource scope. Insert components. Insert reflect. Inside of insert reflect. Insert reflect is doing it. I don't think we actually have an issue. I think insert reflect relies on it being run as a command on entity mute world. It's not the right thing. Entity world mute, insert reflect on entity world mute. Right, adds the reflect components, right? Using the data, reflection data in app type registry. This will overwrite previous components of the same type. But this function looks for app type registry, I think. So this will be resource scope, which pulls the app type registry, which we don't want to do. In our use case anyway, we don't want to do that because we already have the registry. We also don't need it mutably. I'm not sure why this is accessing the registry mutably, but sharing it. Maybe that's for change detection specifically. Insert reflect with registry reference. Theoretically, which requires an entity world mute, which we have, a type registry, which we have, and a component, which we have. This isn't a public function, but it is a function that I can make public. So this would be just another PR, hopefully like another PR that would make it into 0.18, but this would just be making this pub or something similar. So this is insert reflect with registry ref, which entity type registry reflect value. When we run that, and it works. Nailed it. Okay, we need to test that it actually worked though. Another note, make this pub. I don't know that this, I don't see a reason for this not to be pub. It's a completely standalone function. It's probably it's probably not what most people want to do. But the alternative is defining it ourselves like this, which is not something we should probably do. Unless we want to change the error handling. This panics, and I don't know that we actually want to panic. So maybe forking this function is a good idea. But let's go into component tests. And let me add a system here for update that queries for player, I think. I think that's the... So the player that gets inserted here should have my name, 8846. Should change that default value. Team member, player, and then test component some things. So we should see this return one value. We got it. It's in. This is glTF extension handling, which has not been merged upstream yet, combined with Blender exporting custom extension data, processed in Skein to insert reflected component data into your Bevy scenes. So this is really cool for a variety of reasons. The most interesting reason being that now, whenever you spawn this scene, the insertion for the component work has already been done. The component work has already been done. So you don't need to on add for all those glTF extras. Um, the scene is already pre-set up with all the component data that you need. The thing that I have, I think, a question about. Thanks, congrats, and thanks to you. Do you even use Skein, Xavier? I don't even know if you do. I appreciate you anyway. So yeah, Skein components getting inserted. So that means team member and stuff should be getting inserted. And then it's just a matter of walking this through and using that function that we just had in all the right places. So this is going to be insert components with these values. And that'll be it. Not yet, but I will. Nice. If you run into any issues, let me know. Um, cool. That's really, really cool. So this is going to basically be this over and over. Anywhere we have these, so like spawn light directional, this one, it's basically just the same thing over and over. And here we don't actually have use cases for the glTF nodes, so we will put underscores before them so that we don't spam people. Now, there's still a couple of things that I need to like test here. This isn't like necessarily the perfect solution. So we need the entity world mute as well. So I don't know how we're going to get the entity world mute here. Actually, I do. Is Rust Analyzer just being really slow right now? What's going on? Not found in this scope because I didn't call it entity. I called it world root ID. And then this is this entity world mute. What is the problem there? Probably needs to be passed in as a mutable reference. Yeah. As mutable isn't what I want. I guess we don't have that. I'll do it the other way. Cool. And then we go back to our other method for this. Right, spawn mesh and material. This is an interesting case because we need to actually get two values and then run this insert twice. You just do not need it for current projects, but it would have helped a lot. Something you needed in Bevy 0 Yeah, I mean, I don't take any. I'm not definitely not taking any offense or anything to you not using it. I don't expect this to be something that everybody needs. You know, I do have a lot of fun figuring some of this stuff out. Cool. Um, cool. The RC apparently is getting cut tomorrow. I need to hopefully get people to review that PR today. I know I'm going to get a review from Andrew later, so hopefully that is in enough time. I would really love to have this for 0.18, but I also understand that I didn't get to it. So here we have ext data, right? Ext data has already pulled, so like this, and then also like this, and this is going to be material. Ooh, do we not have material here? Extras, mesh, camera. Does mesh have material on it? For X in Y. Okay, so I do need primitives, I think, for materials. We need to debug this and make sure that we're actually getting. Why would I want that? Let me make sure that we're actually getting the thing I think that I'm getting here. Don't think I actually am. You like the idea of Skein since it simplifies the workflow. You know how to navigate Blender fairly well and can just hot reload the app. You're not sure what benefit an extra editor would give for me. I think that if you're familiar with Blender, that is already a high bar. I think that the benefit of specialized tools is that they are specialized and do specific things. Blender is a generic tool that does a lot of different things. So, for example, if you're comfortable in Blender and it works for you for doing level design and you can do things, everything you need, right? It has UV mapping, it has unwrapping, it has, texture painting, it has, I can't pronounce this, but UQ paint. It has animation, bone-based. It has physics simulation and geometry nodes that you can calculate things and export them to glTF and whatnot. And all of that is fine. There are user experience issues with like inserting components and stuff. You don't get certain things for example, you can't tell what entity something is going to be, right? Um, whether that actually matters or not is use case dependent. For many things, it doesn't. Even without Skein, you can still on scene instance ready do all the work you would need to do, right? Blender also has film and video editing and compositing. Yes, it's a very like broad tool. It has grease pencil, right? People use Skein for 2D applications. I just helped somebody in the Discord last night, something like that, figure out their 2D workflow. As for what a specialized editor could give you, I think specialized tools would be the answer, right? Tools for specifically working with batches of BSN or specifically working with hot reloaded Bevy shaders and things like that. I think that also there is something to be said for multiple tools existing in production workflows. Like a specialized editor could be very good at a specific thing. Maybe that specific thing is like, I don't know. Trying to think of something. Maybe there's like a Bevy SDF renderer and you use SDFs for something, and there's a specialized Bevy internal like editor, SDF editor or something. Or for example, working with colliders with Avian or something. Like Avian could provide their own plugin. I think that definitely knowing Blender, the bar gets higher for what is useful. And the bar goes up to kind of specialized tools. I don't think that, how do I frame this? I think that having an editor expands the set of users for Bevy. I don't necessarily think it has impact for experts unless that specialized tooling can also get built. I think that's the way I'll frame it. I think that the editor itself would probably be good for people starting new projects or newer users and things like that. I think if you're a Blender expert, it's hard to beat Blender at a 30-year game, right? But Blender is also not a game development tool, and it doesn't know anything about BSN. I'm hoping that the BSN asset format will get specified at some point, and that we can hopefully get like a Blender BSN exporter. I think that would be really cool. But we'll see. I don't know. Yeah, you were thinking of the Bevy. Yeah. So the Bevy editor, in the sense that there is a Bevy editor, the Bevy editor, to some extent, is a toolkit for building specialized editors, is the way that I would frame it. I think the Bevy editor, in the sense of like Godot has an editor and Bevy would also have an editor, that is more of a beginner tool. I get nervous anytime somebody is like, "Oh, the editor will solve that," because I don't like kicking the can down the road to a GUI application. But the Bevy editor itself, especially with Viridia's work, is at least partially about building the toolkit so that people can build specialized pieces of editors. So if you have specific mechanics in your game and you do all the level design and character creation and animation in Blender, but you go into Bevy and your special editor, to do some subset of that work. I think something like that will probably be a potential workflow for Blender users. Um, there are people who prefer doing level design in other programs. There are people who like the simplicity of the restriction of Trench Broom, for example. I think if you're a person that likes Blender and knows Blender, it's hard to sell you on something like Trench Broom. But brush-based level design is popular for people who want to opt into that restriction. So building similar things that are Bevy native. I think Avian, for example, is a great example of how many times can I say example in the same sentence? Avian is a good example of adoption mounting when something is Bevy native. So given LDTK and tiled, a Bevy native tile editor would gain more adoption, right? At least in the Bevy ecosystem. So rather than using LDTK and rather than using tiled, if there was a Bevy native 2D tile editor that knew something about the tile map chunk rendering abstraction and such, that could be very useful. But the bar is higher, right? Especially for somebody who like knows Blender. The bar for what a Bevy editor would need to do to be useful is different than a beginner. The other thing is like, maybe you just want to build debug tooling, right? So like, if you think of the Bevy editor as a series of widgets and stuff that all come together to live alongside your application, you can think of building nice debug tooling for different things alongside the game. And that is still like the Bevy editor in a sense. We don't have any data on a mesh, do we? And we don't have any on materials. So I need to do that as well. Yeah, that makes perfect sense. Yeah. Yeah. I personally am in the same kind of boat. Like the Blender does so much for me. I feel the pain of not having like a Bevy editor significantly less than other people do. So I know where you're coming from. I need a test scene that has a component on every type of thing. I need to make sure that bones, for example, have components that come in. There's a whole set of, where do I find this list? This list is in the extension in, I started redoing the imports so that they're a little bit more maintainable. So objects, meshes, materials, scenes, lights, collections, and bones. Of those, objects, collections, bones, and scenes are all, no, objects, collections, and bones are all nodes. Light is also a node because those get collapsed. And camera is also a node. And then mesh and material combine into one entity. And I think that's the full set of stuff. So I think we only need nodes, the mesh material hook, and the scene hook, actually. I think those are the minimal three for handling every type of object that Skein can currently put a component on. Oh, Bevy revived the Blender game engine? No. Not that I know of, anyway. I think, what is that other, there's that other Blender game engine. There's something. There's something that exists, and I can't remember what it's called. Start with Armory. Armory. UPBGE. Is that what it is? Is that what one of them is? BGE. Upag. Open source 3D game engine forked from the old Blender game engine and deployed with Blender itself. Cool. That's not the one I was thinking of. I was thinking of Armory. Armory is interesting because it kind of does similar things, I think, to what Skein does. Manual. Multi-user Armory API. They do a little bit of like API building and stuff, but I think they have light maps too. Materials, post-processing, vertex colors, tile sheets. I think nav mesh is a good example. So there is recast. I think is what Jan is calling it. Jan has been working on this for a fair bit now. And it's recast based navigation meshes. It has a separate, this is a good example of a specialized kind of like editor. There's a separate like specialized editor. Armory also does things with recast. They do recast building from within Blender. I think it would be very cool to like find a way to integrate something like recast by calling out to it from within Blender or something like that. So there's a bunch of things here that are like vaguely related to what Skein is doing. I thought they had light maps. Optimize, debug, logic nodes. Can't remember. Yeah, they have light maps. So like in some sense, similar, right? Where it's kind of like a bunch of stuff on top of what Blender does, and they do something very much more direct than what Skein is doing, but yeah. In any case, it's very interesting. I think I'm happy with having gotten this to work. I hope y'all enjoyed me messing around with the type registry and stuff. This unfortunately never gets called because we don't have that happening because they don't have the extension data. Let's get component tests. I'm going to not log this out. This should run, I think once. So there's our little thing with the mesh on it. So just grabbing the appropriate glTF metadata. I guess that's on glTF mesh. We could do on primitive. I avoided doing primitives because I feel like there could be a lot of them, but maybe we should have primitives because primitives are really what Bevy meshes are. And if you want to process Bevy meshes, then that has to be there. I did leave it out, but I could add it in. The other thing is that this warning is fake. This is not true. The inherited visibility component has a hook that doesn't actually check for if it's being inserted or not. Validate parent has component. Bevy ECS hierarchy. Bevy ECS, source, hierarchy. Hierarchy? Where's hierarchy? Hierarchy. Validate parent has component. And this is effectively when inherited visibility gets created here, which when you insert a mesh 3D on something or a mesh 2D or whatever, then it does the check. But it hasn't been attached to its parent yet. So you get this warning, even though the warning doesn't actually mean anything, which is kind of annoying. On that note, have I tried O3DE? I have not. I've heard of it. I feel like I've seen that before. This is not something that I've used before. So I know nothing about it other than that it exists. I think this function I feel like is an anti-pattern. Or it at least needs a way to silence it. I guess you could silence it by first inserting no, like it's, I don't know. It's awkward. It's definitely awkward. But that's another thing that I need to actually check. A bunch of people do things via hooks right now, and it's potential. How do I say this? This is let's do info once, I guess. So we run this and we get our insert. And then this happens, but did this get inserted before or after the... Actually, that's an easy thing to know. Hang on. Let me cook. Add an observer here for a on add player. And we'll just debug here. Cool. Only one of them is what I wanted to see. This warning is going to be really annoying. I think doing anything with these is going to be really annoying. I don't know why it shows up like that. I know why it shows up, but I don't know if there's a way to silence it. So I'll have to figure that out too. But this is going to pop up a lot. It's also, I think, a thing that can get fixed in a point release. So I'm not really worried about it. Cool. It's like almost 12. That's about the time that I stopped streaming anyway. So I'm happy with having gotten this all done. I'm going to finish up probably the implementation here. Try to round some people up to do some review on that PR so it can get merged. And then, yeah, that's about it. Thanks for hanging out, everyone. And I'm going to call it on that note. And I will see you next time.